Hi friends and new friends, and welcome to the second episode of the Darren Tapp Files. Today we're talking about fake news and avoiding false narratives. It's something that we see in our day-to-day lives quite a bit, and it's also something that we especially see in the cryptocurrency space. When you're dealing with money, you have lots of people that have lots of incentive to try to lead you astray and lead you the wrong way. People with different various agendas that try to promote coins that maybe aren't exactly 100% above board, and other people that try to say that the coins that you support are not very good. I have a story to tell you before we start about when I joined cryptocurrency in 2013. I was researching into Dash, and I saw a lot of things online about how the starting of Dash was a scam, the launch of Dash was a scam, Evan Duffield was a scammer, all his mistakes that he made were premeditated, and everything else. So basically people said if I invested in Dash, I was going to lose my money. So sure enough, I did my own research and I looked into Dash and everything that was going on, the people behind it, and I found out that this news was totally bogus. This is a great community and I'm happy to be here to this day, and that's why this channel exists. So our guest today, Darren Tapp, he's seen it all as well. He's seen examples of where news has gone bad, and he's seen examples of positive journalism that actually broadcast the facts. So we have lots of competing factions in this space, and we're going to weed out what's good and what's bad. And we're going to talk about Darren's publications that he's made and how the media has responded to them as well. I'm Christopher Carruthers, also known as Tao of Satoshi, and you're watching Cash Alternative TV. So what is Cash Alternative TV, other than that catchy jingle? Well, it's a show about cryptocurrency with a focus on Dash, which aims to be an alternative to cash, a digital cash for the world. Such as my title, Cash Alternative TV. So if you're into cryptocurrency and want to learn more about Dash or just want to hang out with me, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell so you won't miss an episode. So without further ado, let's get into our second episode with Darren Tapp. Hello everyone, and welcome to this second episode of the Darren Tapp Files. With me I have Assistant Research Professor Darren Tapp from the Arizona State University. He works at the Blockchain Research Lab. It's sponsored by Dash. If you missed the introduction, I'll leave the link below to the introduction episode that we had. Today we're going to talk about false narratives in the news and false narratives in cryptocurrency, which we see on a day-to-day basis. So welcome to the show, Darren Tapp.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, so we're talking about false news. Something that's very important to you is research and genuineness in your reportings, right?
Right.
So what is it have you reported recently?
Well, in the past few years, I've published DIP1, which took the Dash network from 1 megabyte blocks to 2 megabyte blocks. I've published a research paper where we simulated the Dash network and that was with the ASU team. I was a co-author on an article that Nakul wrote for his thesis, and that was on a different propagation protocol called Velocity. And so, and we had very promising results with that, but they were only at the simulation level. So we would want to try to emulate it as the next stage. And then also I'm a co-author on, I believe, the second paper on the graphene propagation protocol. Now, all these things are related. When we were writing the first paper about scaling, we wanted to investigate how the network would scale if we use different propagation protocols. And at the time, there was already 3 in use. The traditional one, which just broadcasts the blocks total in full, the compact blocks, which is on the Dash network now, and XThin, which is used by the Bitcoin Unlimited. And so we were investigating those 3 propagation protocols, and we found that the network could handle a different capacity of transactions based on what propagation protocol was used. So that's one reason we've studied propagation protocols so much, because basically the first hurdle you run into when you scale a Bitcoin network or the Dash network would be that you're starting to run into bandwidth limitations. And so Compact and XThin and even Graphene, which is the next gen, so to speak, all of those work by trying to reduce the amount of information that's needed to transmit a block to the receiving node. And then what Nicole did with velocity, it actually uses more bandwidth. It goes the other way. But we found it works very well because you can avoid re-requests, and it's also advantageous because it's not subject to what's called a poison block attack, which the other ones are. But the other ones are, but they're alive in the network, and we really don't see it being a problem. If you need the other propagation protocols, it's nice to have something you can fall back on, like velocity, where if you fall back on velocity, you can still keep the network running at its expected capacity.
Okay, well, I find that valuable, the research that you guys are doing there, because any more further eyes on cryptocurrency is very welcome. And I'm sure you guys have a group of scientists there that are very passionate about what they're doing towards blockchain. But whenever you introduce the media, then you introduce a different element, right? Some people might not understand your research, or they might spin it a different way.
Right.
So how were the papers that you've released from Arizona State University in the media? How have you seen them pick up your research and distribute it to their followers and viewers?
So the first paper we wrote, we basically were just trying to answer the question, how big can the network be? We basically determined two cutoffs where you would not want the network to be much bigger. One cutoff I called the economic limit, and that's where I think that the fee will not justify the miner including another transaction in the block. Okay, so as the fee goes up, the block could get bigger. As the fee goes down, the block could get smaller. But I was just assuming that the fee is the minimum to compute that economic limit. And then the other limit on one of these networks is basically where the blocks can't propagate quick enough, and then the network will lose consensus. So there's these two kind of breaking points. And so we wanted to give breaking points that the network could use. So we were mainly focused on the economic limit. But sometimes when we run our simulations, they would predict we could see that the network was not incongruent. So we published that as well. The economic limit sounded pretty good. All in all, we've got with no propagation speed up, we got the paper says that it was 700, like around 750 kilobytes for a block, which is not huge, but it's still 3 times the capacity of Bitcoin because the blocks on Dash come out 4 times as fast. With compact, we found that the blocks could be up to 4 megabytes, which is double what the max is right now, so that's great. But one thing that was kind of hard to explain in the paper is that we found that compact, when it starts failing, it fails hard. so that 4 megabyte limit, that at least in the paper with the simulations we did, that was kind of, if you go much more than that, like the economic limit and the network failing kind of is almost at the same spot. And the economic limit doesn't even care what the fees are. The orphan rates are quite low until about 4 megabytes. So we got that. And so your question was, where is it in the media? So the paper had 3 limits, right? And then somebody in the media took that and said, oh, Dash can only go up to 750 kilobytes. And that's all they said. And at the time, Dash had already switched over to compact blocks. So so the person writing the article was already old, stale, because Dash had already switched over to compact. So now, for all intents and purposes, the block size can be 4 with no problem. And then if somebody publishes a same type of article today, they should say that was published so long ago that probably the limits have changed. And it probably can be much higher than that because just how computers get better and better. So I thought it was kind of crazy that somebody presented it this way and didn't say, oh, they can go up to 4 right now. Right? And then once they bring an X, then they can go to 10 and even bigger. But I feel like that was purposely misleading, misrepresenting our results. Before we published with the ASU, I went to the Dash team and told them, hey, and I had encouraged them to do the hard fork to go up to 2 megabytes and all that. And they did that. And then I was like, hey, now we're getting research that says the miners probably will get a little nervous around 750 kilobytes. And so, and then I told them the way to fix that is put anything in that's not the traditional propagation. And so we went back and forth on that, and compact was the winner. But I'm very enthused about XN and graphene as well. So.
Okay, so there could be a few reasons why things would be misrepresented in the media. I think one would be because the journalists are in such a rush to put something out. I was talking with Amanda B. Johnson about this recently, and she was saying that journalists, like, they want to get the story out as quick as possible so they can be presented with the next story and they can have the breaking news and everything else. So they might not do their research enough, right?
Right.
But that's one reason, and another possible reason could be like agendas by certain news companies. They might not favor one currency, and they might favor another one,
right?
And they just want to post that misinformation out there. So yeah, you definitely have to be careful when you're reading and do your own research and everything else. So yeah, I think that the research that you're doing is very valuable, but it doesn't do any good if people don't know about it and people are finding out about it the wrong way, right?
Right. So. Yeah, so that was the first paper we published, and yeah, so that's some people will take whatever part of it they like and then present that out, and it ends up they take a true statement, but the way they present it is misleading or not genuine. So that's something that bugs me a little bit. And like I said in the first episode, or when we were laying out all 4 episodes, I want to mention kind of the nuts and bolts of how it works. And I just kind of wanted to first step out there and say, hey, we're going to talk about how it works, and there's good and bad and all of that. And you might see people exaggerate a portion of how it works. And so I just want to step out in front of that and say, hey, go through and check your sources, and actually try to look up the opposing view and see who has the better citations and all of that.
Yeah, before we continue with asking your questions, I just want to make a comment about false news that happens with Dash all the time, specifically referencing the launch. There's a lot of miscommunication out there regarding the launch. I did a very in-depth research on the launch, and found out a lot of the things that are floating around there about Dash quite simply aren't true. A lot of mistakes were made at the beginning. There's no way of knowing whether these are like malicious mistakes or just like trying to scam people. But in my opinion, I think that it's a guy trying to rush the code out, and he didn't do enough research on it, because there was a time where he actually raised the amount of Dash that was supposed to be out there. And people are saying he lowered the capacity of Dash, so it means he wants to have more value for his own coins. But then he went in, he raised the capacity of Dash, so I flew in the face of everything that they were talking about. So yeah, the fake news out there, specifically about the Dash launch, is definitely pretty astounding, actually. And if you do your own research, you'll definitely find out that it's not. It likely was a mistake.
I remember I heard 80% of Dash has already been mined, and all it's out there. And when I joined the project, less than half was out.
Yeah.
So it's like 80% could be mined in the beginning, because there hasn't been 80% out yet.
Right.
So it's pretty annoying, But I mean, that's something that's not hard to check. You just look at what the cap's supposed to be. It's around 18 or 19 million, and how much there's released right now. Last time I checked, it's around 8 million, maybe. It's probably more now. Let's see, 9 million now. So we're about right at half released currently. That's years into this project. So
yeah. So if anybody wants to research about Dash's launch or anything about Dash, I'm going to leave the link below to that research, and you can check it out. That's the actual true news. That's evidence that I have gathered. Yeah. So it's not. There's nothing there. That's my assumptions or anything.
Yeah,
that's just evidence that I've gathered.
I think I read something. I don't know if it was yours or not, but it was citing to like the actual Bitcoin talk posts and all of that. So it really was citing what was happening way early on and publicly available information. So
all right, so on that note, let's continue. So let's go over a couple of scenarios. Let's first go over the bad news, like what's the bad way of doing it, and then after we'll look at a good way that you've encountered, a place that you think actually you can trust to give mainly positive news, like mainly the news that's actually happening and not fake news. So let's go off. The first step, the first one is going to be the bad news. Like who's giving fake news out there, and what kind of fake news have you encountered in the past?
Well, I mean, really, there's a quote, I forget who goes back to, Eleanor or somebody, um, you know, small minds talk of people, good minds talk of events, and great minds talk about ideas. I find that the people that are promoting the kind of false narratives uh, almost always anchor it back to a person or a personality, and then they'll do the ad hominem, which is a common logical fallacy, where you attack the character of a person and kind of suggest that makes some statement one way or the other on your argument. But the actual fact is, it doesn't really matter the character of the person making a claim. The claim's either true or false, and it's independent of the reputation of the person making the claim. Now there is something to be said. Maybe the person doesn't have a reputation of saying true things, but that's a different story. Often with ad hominem, they just say just negative things, like, oh, they have too much money, or oh, they're promoting, and they'll use, usually the very short arguments are the ones that you want to not accept as true right away, right? The kind of shorter ones, because especially in this space, usually it takes a good amount of reading to understand what's going on. A lot of things are like 9 pages long, so you can read 9 pages and have a very good understanding of what's going on. There's probably a disconnect between what I'm saying, you read 9 pages, and a general population, because as I went through and I learned all this math stuff, so when they start using all their funny symbols, I can churn through that pretty quickly. Or quicker than most. Actually, I'm pretty slow, but I actually can finish. That's really what it is.
It has something to do with attention spans too, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm sure they're not. I mean, that's a different issue.
Yeah, for sure.
That's not. We're not going to solve that with the podcast.
No.
But yeah, go home and read a book if you're worried about your attention span. A real book, like take it out of the shelf and read it. I think when you want to find true information or correct information, you should be able to go back to the source. When you go back to the sources, it should explain everything right away, and you should get a lot of details about how it works and all that. Basically, the further you go into the details, the better understanding you're going to have of it, and the harder it's going to be for people to tell you false things. Right? Does that make sense? And you can't get all your sources from one spot. So, like, I'm working at the ASU team, but I've done some collaboration with the UMass team, so you might want to talk to them too. And get information from different sources, and a good information source will agree with other ones. So let's go to your question: how to get I'm relaying into how to get true information. So you get true information by going to sources, and then actually going through the sources. I remember. When Bitcoin was early on, there was something that was launched called the Bitcoin Savings and Trust. Okay, and so supposedly you would put your money on the site, and you put your Bitcoin on the site, and you would get 7% interest, and it was ridiculous. It was like 7% in a day or a month or something. It was a ridiculous amount of interest. So I, went on the chat board, the forum, and asked the person that was doing this whole thing. I said, how do you make money? And there was just it was kind of like a gobbledygook answer. It was like, I don't understand how you do this process and get more money than you started with, right? And certainly don't see how you're making 7% a month to cover what your basically your expenses, interest. And so, of course, I never sent any money into this thing. Now, there's also another thing that was a tip off this. It was called they called it a bank. He called himself a bank, which that should make you wary right away, because the whole point of Bitcoin was that you didn't need a bank, right? Yep. So if somebody's saying, hey, let's use this bank with Bitcoin, it's like, well, you didn't really understand the point of Bitcoin. So that was a little bit concerning, and so I didn't put any money in. So, and then I don't know if your listeners know or not, but that eventually was exposed as a Ponzi scheme, and I think some guy in Texas went to jail over it.
Yep.
So, and then I've met people that kind of lost money in that whole thing, and I feel sorry for it, but at the same time, I feel like just that asking those simple questions, how do you make money, really kind of exposes that, hey, there's something here that doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, so the advice that you would give to people that are watching us is that to do your own research, because you're dealing with your money and it's your investments, and you definitely don't want to be going over what somebody on the internet says.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you want to look at empirical evidence and posted research, and even go to multiple sources, like you said. Like one person might say something and another person might say something else, and you have to ascertain what you feel is probably the correct thing. So yeah, definitely don't just assume, just don't take somebody's word for it on the internet. It's a DYOR, do your own research. Yeah. So yes. Do you have anything to add to that?
Oh yes, definitely do your own research. Ideally, it would be best if you could go and find kind of journal articles supporting the statements. But if you actually do your own research, you're going to run into the paper by Satoshi, which is not published in a journal, and it's not officially peer reviewed. But as far as I'm concerned, I consider it peer reviewed because I know enough people have read it, and enough people have reviewed it. Enough people know that what he's saying, what this author is saying, whatever their gender is correct, right? Like at the end, he has this section calculations, and you can just look at, yes, he's calculating it. Yes, that's how you calculate it. Yes, he's coming up with these answers. You can verify that that's right. And that's where, that's the part where he's showing that it's secure as long as nobody has 51% of the network. That's where the 51% attack is introduced as a problem, right? But the whole paper was, trying to solve a problem that couldn't be solved, and now it can be solved just as long as nobody has 51% of the network. So that was a huge advance forward. And so if you're doing your research, you might go to the ASU paper, which is not published in a journal, not peer reviewed. So sometimes they call these white papers. And but then you can also find a velocity research, which is it was to appear last time. I think it's already appeared now. So that's in a journal, and the UMass research is, much of it's in journals. So
can you explain what's the significance of being in a journal for a layman like me?
So personally, I don't think everything needs to be in a journal. Like I was saying, that the Satoshi paper I take as fact because I've read it and I went through it. But when things get published in a journal, what happens is the editor first says, yes, this is a significant work. So you get kind of a filter of what people think significant or not. Now, I don't like these gatekeepers, but sometimes they're useful, right? And then before it actually gets published, so it says, yes, we'll publish it. So then usually it's about 6 months, 8 months, could be a year until it actually comes out in the journal. And during that 6 months, 8 months, they will have a reviewer review the paper. So they'll have somebody in the field read the whole paper. And if they find anything that's wrong about that paper, they'll reject it. It won't get things. And sometimes they'll find something that's wrong and they'll say, hey, author, could you make this little tweak here because this technically this sentence, the way it's written, is not right. And so the author will then make the tweak, and then it'll get published. So being in a journal, like pretty much all the reputable journals have that peer review process. So they've done the work for you, so to speak. Now, in mathematics, when I was writing my thesis, I didn't want to trust everything just because it's in a journal. I would actually, read the paper, and then it said, the references that I needed for the logical part, I would actually go in and make sure that those references did support what was being said in the paper. So, I mean, I'm not saying you should trust these blindly, but kind of as a first pass of the information, this might be a good place to start. And then, and and like with our white paper about ASU, it's you can see that it's not saying, oh, we could scale for forever, no problem. It's saying, oh, in this situation, blah blah, this situation, blah blah, this. So I think that's a little bit more reasonable. You're not, the people that are going to lie are going to just make extreme claims one way or the other.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely want to watch out for that. The people that are saying this, everything is sunshine and roses. Those are the people you got to watch out for. The people that create balanced opinions and present balanced opinions, they're more likely to be true. But you still have to do your own research on top of that.
Exactly. So get information from us or anybody. Definitely go through. I've been having a lot of fun unfollowing the people that do the ad hominem attacks, and then you get a much happier Twitter thread or whatever if you do that. It's always people, events, ideas. So really start to drill down into the ideas, and if somebody needs to attack another person for their argument, that's a good time to be skeptical.
Okay, that brings us to the conclusion of the second episode of the Darren Tapp Files. If you missed the first one, which was the introduction, you can see it in the link below. And there's going to be two more. There's going to be one about security and cryptocurrency, and there's going to be another one specifically about Dash at the end. So we're happy you've joined us, and we're happy to have you on the show there, Darren Tapp.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Until the next time, take care.
All right.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Well, that was the second interview. I hope you were able to glean some information about fake news and how to protect yourself out there, and got to know Mr. Tapp a little bit better. Fascinating guy, isn't he? Well, that's it for me today. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and click the bell if you want to see more from me in Cash Alternative TV episodes. Until next time, remember, Dash is a better money for a better future, and that future is getting closer every day. Bye for now.
Alternative.